Your heating bill in February is $310. 3 leaks are responsible for $190 of it. They are not your windows. They are not your doors. They are not the gaps you've already sealed. They are invisible, but they have signatures. And tonight, we find them. Think about a forest in January. Deep snow. -5 outside. And somewhere in the understory, a hollow log. Inside that log, it's 40 degrees warmer than the air around it. The log isn't heated. It isn't insulated with foam or fiberglass. It is sealed. Continuous. No gaps between the inside and the outside except the ones that belong there. Your cabin, your farmhouse, your rural home, was built with that same logic in mind. The builders thought in terms of envelope, a continuous boundary between conditioned space and unconditioned space. Above, below, and on every side. But somewhere in the decades between the original build and the morning you're standing in your kitchen, in a flannel shirt wondering why the propane bill keeps climbing, 3 points in that envelope opened up. Not because something broke. Not because a storm came through. Because they were never sealed to begin with. Here's the shape of the problem before we name the leaks. Stack effect. Warm air rises. You already know this. Everyone knows this. But here is what most people don't follow to its conclusion. If warm air is rising inside your house, something has to pull in from below. And if it can escape from above, it will. Without asking permission. The stack effect is not a theory. It is happening inside your home. Right now. Every hour the indoor temperature is warmer than the outdoor temperature, which in a heating climate means all winter. Your house is a chimney. The question is only whether it's a well-designed chimney or a leaking one. 3 points in most rural homes built before 1990 turn a manageable stack effect into a serious one. And here is the part that surprises people every time. You cannot feel these leaks at shoulder height. You cannot find them by pressing your hand against the window trim on a cold night. These leaks do not generate draft where people stand. They operate vertically in the parts of the house you visit least. The dust has found them, though. We'll come back to that. The first leak. Your ceiling is not a solid surface. You think it is. You've painted it, you've stared at it, you've fixed cracks in it. It looks sealed. But inside your attic, above the plane of that drywall, every wire, every pipe, every duct, every recessed light that was ever cut into that ceiling, left a hole. Not a hole you can see from below. A hole that lives in the gap between the drywall surface and the actual air boundary of the house. Electricians run wire through ceiling plates. Plumbers stack vent pipes through the top plates. HVAC installers cut duct boots. Builders install recessed cans. And in a well-sealed house, every one of those penetrations gets sealed with fire-rated caulk or acoustic sealant before the insulation goes in. In most houses built before 1990, they do not. The insulation sits on top of the drywall. Fluffy, thick, looks correct from above. But underneath it, the ceiling is perforated. And the insulation does not stop air, it slows it. Only an air barrier stops air. So warm pressurized air from your living space finds the wire penetration next to the ceiling fan box, moves up through the insulation, and enters the attic. This is called attic bypass. And it accounts for, in many cabins, more heat loss than all your windows combined. Here is how you find it. Go into the attic on a cold morning before the sun heats the roof. Bring a flashlight. Look at the insulation around any penetration. Look at the insulation around any recessed light. Look at the top plates where the walls meet the ceiling. You will see gray or dark staining in the insulation fibers, directly around the penetrations. That is dust. Carried by the air that moved through, the insulation acts as a filter, and the dust left behind marks every single path that warm air used to escape. You are not guessing where the leak is. The house already told you. The dust signature is the map. 6. Foam backer rod plus acoustical sealant on wire penetrations. Fire-rated caulk on anything near a flue or combustion appliance. A sealed metal or rigid foam cap on every recessed light can before insulation returns. The materials cost between $30 and any hardware store. The improvement is permanent. Before you add force, read the flow. The second leak, find the lowest framed wall in your house. The first stud bay sitting above your foundation, where the sill plate meets the floor joist, and the floor joist meets the band joist or rim joist, and all of that sits on the foundation wall or slab edge. This junction, in most rural homes, has never been touched. It is not visible from inside. It sits in the crawl space or the unfinished basement, in the corner where the framing meets the concrete. Builders frame the wall. They set the floor system. They insulate the wall cavities and the floor above. But the rim joist itself, the thin band of wood that closes the floor joist bays at the edge of the foundation, very rarely gets air sealed. What that means in practice: cold air from the crawl space or the basement perimeter infiltrates through the rim joist bays. It moves up between the subfloor layers. It enters the conditioned envelope in a slow, distributed way, not as a single draft you can feel, but as a volume of cold that the heating system has to overcome every hour. In a typical 1,200 square foot cabin with an unfinished perimeter, the rim joist alone can represent 15 to 25% of total infiltration. The diagnostic is simple. In winter, with the heat running, hold your hand near the floor level against an exterior wall on the ground floor. Not at knee height, at ankle height, in the corner where wall meets floor. If you feel cool movement, or if the floor feels notably colder than the air a foot above it, the rim joist is not sealed. The fix: cut rigid foam board to fit each joist bay at the rim, 2 inches minimum. Press it in against the rim joist. Seal the perimeter of each piece with spray foam or acoustical sealant. The material cost for a full perimeter of a standard cabin runs $40 to $90 in rigid foam and foam sealant. It is one of the highest return on investment air sealing projects available. It is also one of the most consistently skipped. The reason builders skip it is not incompetence. It is sequence. By the time the structure is framed and the sill is set, the project is moving fast. The insulation crew comes in, the inspector signs off on the cavities, and the rim joist gets buried under the subflooring and forgotten. The house was trying to work. Someone sealed it shut in the wrong places. The third leak is the quietest and often the most expensive. If your home has a chimney for a wood stove, a fireplace, or an oil or gas furnace, and that chimney is built inside the thermal envelope of the house, there is very likely a chase around it. A chimney chase is the framed enclosure that surrounds the flue from the roof to the ceiling level. It protects the flue. It provides clearance, and it creates a sealed vertical column of air that connects your basement or crawl space to your attic. Most chases are not insulated. Most are not air sealed where they penetrate the ceiling plane. Here is what happens in winter. Cold air enters the bottom of the chase from the crawl space or the basement. It warms slightly. It rises. It exits into the attic through the top of the chase framing. Your attic is cold. The replacement air comes from outside through the attic vents or from the house below through the very penetrations we just talked about. The chimney chase acts as a convective loop. Not through the flue, which may be properly dampered, but through the framed structure around the flue. You have, in effect, a dedicated vertical shaft that moves warm air from your living space to your attic continuously as long as there is any temperature difference between inside and outside. No fire required. The diagnostic here is harder. You need to access the attic and look at the chase framing from above. Look for frost on the inside of the roof sheathing directly above the chase. This indicates that warm, moist air has been exfiltrating there. Look for staining or discoloration on the framing members around the top of the chase. In extreme cases, you can feel warmth rising from the top of the chase framing with your hand, even with no fire burning. The fix requires two things. First, rigid insulation boards on the interior faces of the chase framing, at least R10 if the chase is interior, higher if it's on an exterior wall. Second, careful air sealing where the chase framing penetrates the ceiling plane. Using the same fire-rated products you used around any flues on the attic floor. This is a project that takes a Saturday afternoon. The material cost is $50 to $130 depending on the size of the chase. 3 leaks. Let's place them in the same house and look at what they mean together. Attic bypass through ceiling penetrations. In a typical cabin, 25 to 40% of total air leakage. Rim joist infiltration, 15 to 25%. Chimney chase convective loop, 10 to 20%. Together, these 3 points can represent 50 to 85% of the uncontrolled air exchange in your home. Everything else, the windows, the door weather stripping, the outlet gaskets, the attic hatch, fills in the remainder. This is the diagnostic inversion that changes everything. Most people start with what they can see. The visible gap at the bottom of the door, the frost on the single-pane glass, the cold floor near the window. And those things are real. They're worth addressing. But they're not where the majority of the loss is happening. The majority of the loss is in the places that don't produce a draft at shoulder height. The places that are hidden in framing, buried in insulation, or tucked into the junction between systems that were built by different trades who never coordinated on the air barrier. Here is the protocol, in the order that matters. Start in the attic. On a cold morning, before any heating cycle begins, bring a bright flashlight and a dust mask. Look for the dust signatures around every ceiling penetration. Mark them. Count them. Photograph them if you want a record. While you're up there, look at the top of the chimney chase framing. Run your hand across the ceiling plane around it. Feel for warmth. Look for frost on the roof sheathing above. Do the attic work first. Seal penetrations with acoustical sealant and spray foam. Cap every recessed light. Address the chimney chase. Return the insulation to full depth over everything you touched. Then move to the rim joist. Access your crawl space or unfinished basement perimeter. Work bay by bay. Cut rigid foam to fit, press it tight, seal with spray foam. Then, and only then, turn your attention to the visible things. The windows, the doors, the attic hatch. The sequence matters because the stack effect is not neutral. If you seal the windows before sealing the top of the envelope, you reduce the outflow slightly, but the driving pressure of the stack effect remains. The air finds other paths, often worse ones. Seal the top, seal the bottom, then finish the perimeter. Total material investment for all 3 projects in a typical cabin runs $130 to $310 in rigid foam, spray foam canisters, acoustical sealant, and fire-rated caulk. All of it available at Home Depot, Lowe's, or any regional building supply. Nothing requires a contractor. Nothing requires removing finished wall surfaces. In a house losing $190 per month in uncontrolled air exchange, a single heating season pays back the material cost several times over. Not in ideal conditions. In typical conditions, in a typical rural home, in a typical northern winter. The improvement doesn't degrade. A sealed penetration stays sealed. A foamed rim joist base stays foamed. This isn't a filter you replace. It's a correction to the envelope. One last thought. These 3 leaks are not the result of poor construction in the sense of careless builders. They are the result of a fundamental mismatch between how trades are organized and how physics works. The HVAC installer thinks about the duct. The electrician thinks about the wire. The framing crew thinks about the structure. Nobody owns the air barrier. Nobody is responsible for the continuous seal from basement to roof. That gap in responsibility is the gap in your envelope. Understanding it doesn't require a blower door test, though a blower door test will confirm exactly what you found and quantify the leakage precisely. It doesn't require an energy audit, though an auditor will walk you through the same 3 points with a thermal camera and a smoke pen. It requires going to the places that no one visits, with a flashlight and a pattern to look for. The dust showed you the path. The frost showed you the convection. The cold ankle showed you the rim joist. The evidence was always there. The fix was always there. You just couldn't see it.